Hello, I'm Citrus, and you're looking at the Gundam collection. Gundam GP03 vs. Neue Ziel Stardust Memory Final Stage, thanks to Japan shopping service Buyee. You can sign up with the QR code or the link in the description or pinned comment below and save 10% up to 5,000 yen off your first order of exclusive Japanese goods from marketplaces like Mercari JP, Rakuma, Yahoo Japan auctions, and so on. Now back to the item. This kit was released in November 2006 for 8,500 yen as part of the Gundam Collection product line. It's a very generic name, but for the most part, it was a series of 1/400 scale PVC mobile suit trading figures. The line ran from 2002 to 2010, covering pretty much every Gundam series that had been released up until then. Accompanying the 1/400 scale mobile suits were also battleships like the White Base and Musai from Mobile Suit Gundam and the Ptolemaios from Gundam 00, as well as mobile armors like the Alpha Azer from Char's Counterattack and Quinmansa from Gundam Double Zeta. A huge catalog of this product line exists at seiyuichi.com, who I think has cataloged every single release. I've included the link here and in the pinned comment for you to peruse at your leisure. Now the box here says limited edition, including a mechanical file and marking seals, but in my experience, I've never seen this box without the limited edition label. So as far as I know, this was the only release of this kit. As with all of the other large kits in this line, the parts come pre-painted, which is a good or a bad thing. If you are a casual builder like me, it's great because it's less work for you to do. But if you're considering doing your own paint job on these, keep in mind that all of the parts are ABS, which comes with its own challenges that polystyrene does not present. Alright, so let's get inside of the box. Before we dig in, I just think it's interesting to point out that the runners are packaged in linked bags, which is typical of what you'd see in a candy toy or trading figure type of product. And I think it's also interesting that the runners are all quite small. The biggest ones are generally about half the size of a regular runner, and it makes me wonder if maybe there was at some point a plan to release the two mobile armors separately in their own like smaller boxes, or maybe even in like a serial release kind of format where you maybe have to buy like 6 or 8 separate boxes in order to build the whole thing. Let's start with the two Gundam collection figures we get in this set. First, the Gabare Tetra. Painting is quite fine, and the molded details are pretty sharp. Could use some lining. And then we have the GP03S Stamen. is in a lying position to be able to fit inside a Dendrobium. And it has quite a lot of accessories because some of the weapons go inside of the weapon containers. It's pretty cool. Here's runners DA1 and 2. While I was unbagging everything, it occurred to me that maybe the small runner size is actually a requirement of the process that Bandai used to apply all of the paint applications. Some of the runners have multiple colors applied to them. This one only has just one. And you can see that the applications are pretty sharp. There's a little bit of messiness inside of this lattice area, but from the distances at which you'll be normally looking at this, they won't be noticeable at all, I think. There's runners DB1 and 2. This is DC 1, 2, 3, and 4. The backs of the container hatches are sculpted as well. This is runners DD1 and 2. There's some strange cases where a whole part is painted one color, and it makes me wonder why they weren't just molded onto the runners of that color instead of being painted like this. But we'll run into this a couple more times. The Eiffel generator is especially impressive to me, the way all the paint is applied very cleanly. There is no DE runner, but I assume it's supposed to be these parts, which are basically unlabeled aside from the ABS marker there. This is DF 1, 2, 3, 4. It's our first instance of seeing two colors painted on the same part and right next to each other. So the very inside is black and then outside is red. Very clean. And if we get really close, you can see that the lines are also colored in as well. It's not just the gray underneath showing through or not being covered up fully. Very impressive. And white here. So 3 colors on this runner in total. Nothing much going on here on the other side, but to show off some really nice sculpted detail for the pipes there. And on the arms, this is DG 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Same red and black treatment on the tiny thrusters there. Very clean. Over here as well, although not on the insides of the sets of 3 clusters there. But I can understand that because these are very deep compared to the other ones. It's kind of hard to even see that the bottom is not painted unless you're looking straight down into it. And these would be the little missile containers. You can see all 3 sides are painted, so this would have probably required a lot of processing, although it was most likely hand painted if I were to guess. And there's a little bit of extra paint here, but it's probably easy to just pick it off and clean it up. DH is just the hatches for all of the containers. And you can see there's kind of molded to maybe have a break here. And I wonder if maybe this was supposed to have been painted with these little latch looking parts, maybe painted a different color. I might go in and do that, but I think just panel lining is enough. Oh, of course, the print date of this kit is 2006 November, because I do not know if there was ever a later print of this kit. And DI is mostly the Dendrobium stand, but also 2 little pedestals for the smaller figures. And down here you can see some shapes that will be used for accessory storage later. DJ are beam sabers, which were clear plastic but painted pink and then white at the base. Curious why they didn't just make the base separate parts, but I guess this was somehow easier or more cost effective for them. And 2 thin wires for the wire-guided missiles, I believe they are. On the Neue Ziel side, we start with NA1234. You can see here there's gray for the stripe and then some black painted in the other details. And similar to the thrusters, the surround is gray, but the very inside is black. So 2 colors at the same time there. And on the head, you can see the surround for the eye is painted in gray, and the eye itself is pink. Same story here on the back. Very good gray details. This is MB1234. Another case where these parts could have probably been on a gray runner and they only needed 1 or maybe not even any paint application, since the center there is also painted black on top of the gray. And over here, some black details here, and black down here with gray above it. And not much going on here or here. But it's worth noting that there's some sculpting on the inside of this back piece and inside of the arms at the cuff and elbow. Here's NC1234. Same fantastic black and red painting in the thrusters here. And just some arms that come out from the shoulder binders. And this is ND1234. These 2 halves are basically the same, just mirrored of each other. Lots of details for the inside of the shoulder armor. More excellently painted thrusters. Lots of nice piping. That would be probably nice to pick out in a metallic color. Perhaps these as well. Same on the other side. Not very common to see, really sharp molding on both sides of a part like this. And these are just the claws, which again, detailed on both sides. NE is a little PVC part that includes some tubes that need to be flexible and the antenna. One of the rare cases where gunpla does contain some PVC. NF is the Neue Ziel stand. No movement here, but also accessory storage underneath. NG is 4 beam sabers painted clear yellow. And a pair of thicker diameter wires for the arms. Onto the first edition bonuses are the marking seals. Have some very nice Anaheim Electronics logos, this giant D logo for Delaz fleet, and some very tiny, well, what would be caution labels, but really at 1/400 scale you wouldn't expect them to really be anything legible, but they do look good. And then the advertised mechanic file, which is a very thin little booklet, just 4 pages, but a lot of nice drawings of the mechanical designs for the anime. I do wish this was a bit bigger, so I can see the details a little bit better, and especially if you were to scan them, they would go in at a higher resolution. But I suppose it's a neat little bonus to include. Most manuals don't cover things to this level of detail, even in perfect grades, to my memory. This is usually stuff that you would see in like a design setting art book or something like that. And of course the back is just ads for the product line. pretty much everything was covered. Most mobile suits that you would generally want to have, you could have. And then the instructions themselves are a little bit strange. They come like this. Now normally for like a high grade or something, right, you would have one continuous sheet and then it would have the colorful stuff on one side and black on the other, but here it's separate. So for the Dendrobium, you have the explanation of features up there, some narrative stuff down here. This looks really cool. I wonder if they did this so that you can like have like a little cutout of this to display or something like that. Like there are perforations that see you're supposed to cut it. Kind of neat, I guess. And of course, a decal guide. Like if they weren't going to include the decals in another release of this, like would they also just exclude this sheet entirely because the decal instructions are here? I don't know. Kind of a weird strategy. And then the instructions are just printed on like a very long sheet of normal paper. And you can see that the style and layout of all of the steps is not too different from what you'd see in like a normal gunpla product. On the Neue Ziel side, closest of the details and some features. Also some stuff from the story. And the same kind of thing where you can cut off these two sections at the bottom with the instructions there. And on the Neue Ziel, really the only decal you're going to use is just that, which is a little disappointing. I mean, we could have split it up a little bit more evenly between the two, right? But yeah, you can see here the other Stardust memory figures you could get, like the Gelgoog Marine, the F2 that I want, the GN Custom, and the Gym Cannon 2. Of course, a small spoiler for what you can do with the Geber Tetra. Same story here as well. By the way, so it is interesting, these runners are all made in China because this is, I guess, it is technically a Bandai hobby product, but, you know, all of the little trading figures are made in China, so I wonder if this is probably made in the same place as well. Even though the same factories wouldn't be using any ABS molds really on the production of the normal figures. And that's the build. Real quick, I want to shout out my local game store, Shane's Cards, in Renton, Washington. If you play card games and you're in the Seattle area, you've likely heard of them. I've personally been going there for over 10 years, and they've been doing really well with the Gundam card game lately, but they've also started carrying gunpla. They don't have an enormous selection yet, but I talked to the owners, and they're happy to order anything you like as long as it's something that's on their order list. And as one of my viewers, if you mention Citrus during checkout, you'll receive 10% off your gunpla products. So if you're in the area, be sure to give them a call or drop by sometime. Let's start with the minifigures first. This is the Gabera Tetra. I panel lined it with Real Touch Red. And it doesn't include any accessories. This is all you get. I would have liked a dome for the back for when the booster is not equipped, and maybe a couple of extra arm options. As it is, because this is just made for the one pose shown on the box, they look a bit unnatural in anything else that you try to do with them. At the very least, I think it would have helped if the left hand was molded vertically instead of horizontally as it is now. It would definitely make it look more convincing in some other poses. You can kind of do a shooting pose like this, but the arm just looks so weird dangling. Other than that, the sculpting I think looks really good, and with the panel lining you can see the details on it a lot more. There's definitely room in there, I think, for you to also go in and maybe even add a little bit more, but as it is, I think it looks pretty nice. And next up is the GP03S. This figure I lined with Gundam Real Touch Gray 2, and the red stripes on the knees, I just jammed a red ballpoint that managed to fit in there, and I think it looks alright. This figure received much more attention in this set once we look at the accessories. So you start with this beam rifle holding arm on the right and the shield arm on the left. You can pop these off, and they're additionally one arm each, holding bazookas in the left and right arm. This one doesn't look great in the standing position like this. Looks a little bit weird, but when it's inside the Dendrobium and the Gundam is kind of like in this position, I think it's supposed to look kind of like it's pointing forwards. The PVC material is pretty soft, so you can heat this up a little bit and bend it into a more convincing position if you like. But it is nice that both of them are usable in multiple ways. One odd thing about my figure is if you look at the pictures on the box on Dalong or Seiuchi, their GP03S are able to stand up straight, and mine can't. If you look closely at the waist joint there, you can see the little ball joint is tilted back really far. On one hand, this does make the lying position inside of Dendrobium look a little bit better because the head can look pretty much straight forward, but it basically means that a normal standing pose is kind of impossible and always looks like it's leaning back. Now for use inside of the Dendrobium, we have a pair of prone position arms like this, and we have a pair of grabby arms to reach the weapons in the containers. On to the main event. Here's the size comparison with the high-grade RX-78-2 Revive. Here's a Neue Ziel. I panel lined it with Real Touch Green 1. Initially, I didn't paint the little details on the gray parts because I wanted the tubes to match the soft tube that goes around the outside. But halfway through the build, I changed my mind and I used the Artex metallic color set to pick out some of the details. I don't exactly remember which colors I used. I kind of just grabbed whatever and then put them back in the box. But you can see, I think they stand out pretty well. I used a kind of greenish shade of gold all along the pipes there. Teal on the little circles behind the head. Pink and silver on the pistons on the neck. And a little bit of like a copper color on the front circle there. Since these details are basically out and visible all the time, I figured it'd be kind of a shame to not help them stand out as much as they can. I also top coated the whole thing The green plastic out of the box looked really shiny and a little too bright for my liking, and I think the matte coat really helped dull it down and make it look a little bit more realistic and less toy-like. As for the build, there's a lot of overlapping parts, so you really can't disassemble this very easily. When I top coated it, I basically just sprayed the whole thing as one thing, just, turning things here and there to make sure I can get underneath everything. And I believe I covered everything pretty well. But yeah, you can hear the ABS on ABS creaking as I move things around. But nothing feels particularly fragile except for a couple of points. So if I lift the arm up and out of the way a little bit, and pull it down, you can see the elbow here. The inside of that is a very thin piece, which doesn't fill me with too much confidence. And inside the shoulder armor are the sub-arms. And the elbows on there are also a pretty thin piece. They are holding pretty well, but I don't know if, maybe over time playing with them too much or whatever could make those parts crack, and fixing that would be a huge pain. In here, there is a little bit of a fitting issue with the upper arms. They don't seem to like to close all the way very well. The other side, it's a little bit worse. I checked multiple times to make sure that there's nothing really in the way that would prevent them, like unshaven nubs or something like that, but it's just what it is. One other thing to be mindful of during the build is these little thrusters on the binders are not keyed to go into a specific direction. So if you are particular and you want them to line up or look symmetric, you have to be careful about how you're rotating them and lining them up before you press them all the way down. And as for gimmicks, there are a couple. So I showed the sub-arms already, so let me unfold it. Aside from the elbow, there is a rotation at the top. The elbow is pretty firm, but the rotation can be a little loose because it's just sandwiched between two parts up here. Also, there's only a rotation at the top here. It does not bend forwards and back, so if you bend it that way, you might break it because none of these pegs are particularly thick. Down in the front, you can see a slightly weirdly shaped hole. They accommodate these forks, basically, and you can see there are little protrusions at the end of the peg, so it's keyed to go in a certain way. And once you press it in and rotate it, it doesn't come out very easily, which is pretty nice. Pretty secure in there. At the end of the fork, you can also attach a beam saber. And that looks really good. The joints seem to have no problem being able to hold it in any number of positions. But like I said, the elbow is tighter than the rotation up there, so it is possible that, depending on temperature or whatever, that if you have your beam sabers up like this, they may just rotate down like that over time. Now on the arm here, in the cruising position, you remove the claws, but you can put them on like so. Each prong is articulated. The SD Gundam version of the Neue Ziel lets you put a beam saber kind of in the middle of the claw, but there's obviously no hole here. And one more thing you can do is take the arm off. You can stick one end of the wire into the upper arm like this, move it back down, and it kind of pinches it at the top so it doesn't fall out. And then you can stick the other end into the forearm, and with some positioning, you can make the claw look like it's being launched. Thing is, this arm is still relatively heavy, and the wire is not the stiffest, but it is still pretty neat. There you go. That's kind of holding it up. And at the bottom is where you put the stand. And unfortunately, there's no cap you can put here to make it look nice if you don't want it on the stand. You can stick the claws onto the back. On the bottom, there are slots for the fork and the beam sabers. I really wish there was kind of somewhere to put the wire as well. I guess you could just kind of fold it up and, I don't know, just precariously stick it into one of these slots and hope it doesn't fall out when you move the figure around, kind of like that or something. Unfortunately, the attachment point is fixed. I really would have liked this to have adjustable angles. When you put the Neue Ziel onto it, it's kind of just standing straight up, which looks okay, but I think it would look much more dynamic if it was able to lean forward more. And speaking of looking dynamic, the sticker here is not the best looking. I think the matte coat does help the edges blend in a little bit, but the nature of the surfaces has to go over, it will just come up. So I would have preferred this to have been a water slide decal. And after you sticker up the Dendrobium, you do get a lot of leftovers that you could put on the Neue Ziel if you like, but I don't think the red and gray markings look the best on green. Typically on green kits like Master Grade Zaku's and the HG Origin Zaku's, Bandai's included white or yellow markings, and I think those look a lot better. Finally, the Dendrobium. We're saving the best for last. In the fuselage, there are a lot of interlocking parts that are pretty difficult to disassemble safely. So while you're following the directions to put this together, do your best to not forget anything along the way. I've attached all of the stickers pretty much as instructed by the manual, except for the ones that go along these types of trapezoid spaces. On the decal sheet, they are basically just a square shape that has to go around it. There are no cutouts. I figured it'd be pretty difficult to make them look good and stick down to all of the little bumps and dips, so I opted not to put them on. But yeah, plenty of stickers left over still, and there's of course still plenty of blank space all over the Dendrobium, so if you like, you can apply more. And of course, after applying all the decals, even though the Dendrobium's parts all come with a pretty consistent matte texture already, a top coat will help the edges of the decals blend in just a little bit better. And fortunately, the Dendrobium is much easier to separate into sections than the Neue Ziel, so the containers all come off like that, and the side accessories can come off pretty easily as well. Yeah, tons of surface detail for you to pick out. I lined this with Real Touch Grade 2 as well. And I think this is a really good density of detail. Not too much that it goes overboard, but not so little that the exterior looks boring. Now let's look at some of the features here. Back there you have some pipe detail, which I picked out with the same metallic marker set. Up front in the eye fill generator, you can flip this disc around, and on the back there's mechanical detail that I also picked out with some metallics. The cannon can move left and right, and the cool thing is that because this part protrudes from the back, you can kind of swoosh it around like this and aim the cannon as you do so, which I think is pretty fun. Down here we have sub arms that ball joints at the bottom. The tip slides forward and pivots a little bit. Inside, opening this up, a little bit tricky, there is a tiny beam saber, so it's not the easiest to pull it out. You certainly can do it, but you actually don't have to, because if you just put the beam saber in the claw, there's actually still enough room behind it, and once you close the claw back up, you pretty much can't even see it in there. So it's a nice feature, but you don't have to risk taking it out and losing it. The door on the side of the cannon opens up and slides forward to reveal the grip. The scope on top can also deploy like this. Of course, it folds away in order to make room for the container to open. And to do that, you have to make sure this part is raised upwards and it's hinged at the top. All 16 of the containers in both banks can open up, and with a bit of effort, you can take the containers out. The kit doesn't include any parts for you to show the containers in a partially deployed state like that, but if I shine a light into the bottom, you can see there is a peg hole down there. So it's possible for you to fashion something out of maybe a toothpick or whatever, stabilize it with some putty, and have it be able to hold a container halfway in to show it mid-deployment. When you're putting the containers back in, an easy way to remember which way they should go is that the latches and corresponding pairs go in opposite directions. So these two, they go up and diagonally like this. These go sideways like that. And since we're here, let's close up the ends and put the stamen inside. Just slide it right down the middle, push up the bottom, and close the covers. Stamen is in there pretty firmly. It's not going to go anywhere. And with one of the accessory containers open, you can see the grabby arm can just about reach it. And the wire gimmick, you take the missile, stick it onto the end of the thin wire. Unfortunately, it does look pretty ugly since it's a white part that's painted gray. You want to remove the cover for specifically this bay. Into the small hole, stick the thin wire, and it looks like the missile shooting out. And as superfluous as it is, the Dendrobium does have a cover for where the stand goes. And we can store the cover on the bottom of the stand. This slot would be for the beam saber inside of the claw. The missile goes here. The cover for the wired missile goes here. And the beam saber goes here. Once again, no designated zone for the wire itself, but you probably could just coil it up and stick it in one of these voids and hope it doesn't fall out. Another benefit is that the stand is angle adjustable. The bottom here, there are 6 positions where it can go into. So this is the tallest position, and this is the lowest position. And additionally, the mount at the very top has teeth for 3 positions. So the forwardmost and then the rearmost. There's just one very critical flaw. To attach the stand, you just put it in, slide it back, and it's pretty stable. But look what happens when I tip it back. And it's fallen off. So the slot for the stand is in the wrong direction. There's a huge oversight because one of the advertised poses for the Dendrobium is with the cannon pointed upwards. This is basically loose on the stand now and it won't stay in place. To combat this, what you can do is stick a piece of putty into the void there, and hopefully that should prevent the Dendrobium from backing off of the stand from just a light jolt and then potentially falling off of your shelf. And let's see exactly how well we can put the Gabera at the tip of the cannon there. First, we put this small clip in big air quotes onto the tip, and then we very gently place our carefully posed Gabera onto the end, and then there you go. That's basically how it works. Nothing is really held in place. It's just very, very precarious. The slightest nudge will basically send the Gabera onto the floor. My recommendation is to maybe put a little bit of putty on the clip so that it grips the Gabera a little bit better. But yeah, all of this is just carefully balanced together right now. Nothing is really sturdy. The Gabera is not really in there, and the Dendrobium is not really on its stand either. There you go. Overall, there are a couple of small problems, but none of which I would say are deal breakers. The construction of both kits is relatively simple, comparable to like a modern HGUC kit, and the softer ABS material that they're all made of does present challenges if you plan on doing full paint jobs, but they also make sanding the gate marks really fast and easy. The ABS I found also absorbs panel lining ink really quickly, so my advice for that is to work fast and in small sections to prevent stains. Neither of the two stands can store the wires or the minifigure parts, so to make sure you don't lose anything, separate storage is still probably necessary. And aside from that, I would have really liked if the set included 1 or 2 escort mobile suits for the Neue Ziel, like the Zakuto, Rikdom, or Drasi. Obviously, this was probably less of an issue at the time this was released, when you can still find the little Gundam collection figures on shelves, but these days it's considerably harder if you want to create a more elaborate display in the same scale. The value and parts count of this set feels heavily skewed towards Dendrobium, but both models are the most modern and fully featured representations of their subjects. The HGUC Dendrobium from 2002, despite its enormity, has only 8 opening container bays out of the 16. At a retail price of 8,500 Japanese yen, the Stardust Memory Final Stage set is already 2.5 times the price of the preceding high-grade mechanics kits. These kits do have more detail, more gimmicks, and beautiful paint processing. But even so, over 4,000 yen each is a master grade price. In 2006, that would have bought you an Akai, a Mark II 2.0, or a Gion. At the time of this video, this kit goes for about 2 to 3 times its MSRP, but it's still relatively easy to find. It's still cheaper than the HGUC Dendrobium, and it's easier to store, build, and display. A reprint is probably never happening, considering the Bandai Hobby and Bandai Spirits websites don't acknowledge the Gundam collection line at all. I would say this kit is grail-worthy for 0083 fans, offering a pair of matching rival machines for creating exciting scenes from the OVA. My personal wish is for a high-grade Neue Ziel sometime in the future, even if the price is high. It certainly should be possible, given that the Neue Ziel is both smaller and structurally simpler and less demanding than the Neo Zeong. Mobile armors may also appear in the Gundam Assemble line, but I highly doubt the quality and value will ever compare to these Gundam collection releases. My verdict is, if you like this kit, buy it while you still can, and maybe let Buyee help you with that, as they have for me. Remember, the link below can get you 10% off your first order up to 5,000 yen, and maybe you can even collect some more Gundam collection minifigures for your own tabletop play. That's all for this review. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.